I've been looking forward to making this video for quite some time, where we take the February 2025 market stats and compare them to where things were in February of 2022. February 2022 is highly regarded as the peak of the market. So if anybody ever says that was the peak, this is the numbers that we're going to be looking at today, comparing them to where things are at today so that we can take a look at a 3-year snapshot of the Toronto real estate market. Before we jump into this, I'm Michael Ouzas. I'm a realtor here in the city of Toronto. If you ever want to book in a call to discuss your plans in Toronto real estate, scan the QR code or click on that first link in the description down below. Now it's been exactly 3 years from the peak of the market. It's a great time to break down where exactly things were and how we got there in February 2022. I do feel that it's sometimes unfair if somebody says, why would you buy at the peak of the market? Because if we look at the factors in this video, it will show what exactly was going on at that time and why prices did what they did. The other factor is where rates were at that time. We will take a look at that as well, and where things were average price, but most importantly, what was going on for the months of inventory. Let's jump right into the February 2025 market stats. And if you watched the full stats video, you would have seen this slide already, but we're going to pay attention here to months of inventory. 4.84 in February of 2025. So basically 1 out of give or take 5 properties selling for the greater Toronto area. Average price around $1,085,000. And of course, at the peak, $1,335,000. About a 25% difference in price from February 2022 to February 2025. Active listings, 7,000 in 2022, almost 20,000 in 2025. And number of sales, 9,000 in 2022, 4,000 in 2025. You might be asking, why are there 7,000 active listings but 9,000 sales? Well, what happens in those kind of markets is usually if there's any carryover from the month of January or the month before, those start to get absorbed very quickly as well. If we look at where condo sales were, 2,700 in 2022, 1,200 in 2025. So about just over half. An average price about 800,000 Greater Toronto area wide, 688 for February 2025. Let's jump over to those numbers in February 2022 and look at the 3 years prior to that. But this is where I really want to focus on, is that 0.77 months of inventory in February 2022. What that means is every single property that came to market was selling, basically. Usually if we look at 1 month of inventory, that's 1 active listing divided by 1 sale. 0.77. So as mentioned, 7,000 active listings, 9,000 sales. If we go back a couple years before that, and if you remember what was going on in the world in 2021 and 2022, those were hovering in around just under 9,000 active listings. And in fact, 2021 was a hot market, 11,000 active sales. If you look at the amount of sales in 2021, we hit 120,000 for the Toronto Real Estate Board. If we put that in perspective, 2023 and 2024 at 65,000 and 68,000 sales was about 130,000 sales between 2 years. 2021 almost hit that number just in 1 year. Average time on market, 13 days. And the biggest factor was that inventory was dropping considerably. And actually there was more sales in February 2021 than there was in February 2022. But if we look back at February 2020, and this is an important metric to think about, is that in March 2020, the entire city of Toronto totally shut down. So there was pretty good momentum in February 2020 and in the 2020 as we were getting into what became basically a 2-year shutdown almost. 8,800 active listings, 7,000 sales. Average price was around 910,000. As we ebbed and flowed through 2020 in and out of lockouts, things started to open up in 2021. Rates were the lowest we've ever seen, and 11,000 sales out of 8,700 active listings. Let's take a look at 2025 for the city of Toronto, and 5 months of inventory across the board, 1,087,000 average price. Back in February 2022, 1,200,000 was the average price. So only about a 12% difference between Feb 2022 and Feb 2025. In fact, most of that drop happened from 22 to 23. And this is where I feel it's important to note that a lot of this drop happened right away once they started raising rates significantly. And we're actually up in price from February 2023. Active listings in 23 was 4,100 versus 2022, 2,700. But look at the sales in 2022, 3,200. What that brings us to is 0.86 months of inventory. And again, we always talk about 2 is that number where you start to see offer dates. You are seeing a property the second it comes on the market and typically reacting on that property. And I remember working with buyers at that time and working with sellers, but on the buy side, essentially we had to book a showing the second that property came on the market, because at that time time in just life, basically, they were not allowing double showings. So essentially, if a great property, a great area came to market, if you didn't book a showing within maybe 6 hours of that property being listed, there were no showings available for the next basically 6 or 7 days. So having that property booked in so you could actually see it and hope to be able to offer on it before somebody else did was incredibly challenging at that moment in time. Average price 1.2 million Feb 2022. If we look at where things were in 2019, that average price was about 840,000 and made a big jump into 2020 and then into 2021, still kept a little bit of momentum. But it's important to note that we were seeing a run up even before all the shutdowns, because that's about $150,000 increase year over year, 2019 to 2020. If we look at where these were, active listings 2,700, total sales 2,400, basically 1 out of 1 properties was selling. So if we're in that 1 month of inventory range for the city of Toronto, prices will go up. It's just basic supply and demand scenario. And I feel that if we ever get to the point where all these active listings start to get absorbed, we will see prices start to increase relatively quickly for the city of Toronto. Let's jump over to the monthly sales data. And this is the row that we are going to pay the most attention to. February 2024, we were at 2 months of inventory, and that kind of held steady through the spring market. And then we started to see more inventory into June, July, August, September. And that's a bit of an interesting scenario because you could see here the active listings basically doubled from February into June. So quite a change there with sales hovering in and around kind of that 6,000 to 7,000 range. But months of inventory started increasing, hitting that high in September 2024. Been hovering around 4 to 5 since basically October. This is where if we look at these months of inventory for February 2022, in fact, going back from February 2021, we hit 1 month of inventory here at 1.04. Essentially, if you look at these numbers, and they are significant here, 8,700 active listings, 1,100 sales. 10,600 active listings, almost 16,000 sales. 2021 was absolutely booming in the Toronto real estate market, and this is Greater Toronto Area, of course. Average price, you could see here, started around $1,045,000 in February, hit a high of 1.1 in May 2021, and then just basically took off from there. And we saw here almost a $100,000 jump from basically November 2021 to January 2022, and then almost another $100,000 jump into February 2022. If we look at the absorption here, this month's of inventory 0.8, 0.7, 0.85, 1, 1, 1, under 1, 1, 0.8, 0.7, 0.5, 0.7, 0.8. Unbelievable to look at those numbers now and see it when we are looking at the months of inventory today and we're at that 5 range. Being at 1 month of inventory is super high competition for any property type. Average days on market, basically 9. So these properties were pretty much selling the second they got to the market. So where does that leave us on the dot chart? And this is where, if we look at those months of inventory ranges, we saw ultra low rates here through 2021 into 2022, and then rates shot up very quickly. The average price, and this is something important to note, where some people say, and I read this online all the time, well, I'm waiting for another 25% drop in pricing. And well, of course, it's always possible, but we saw a big drop in pricing from February 2022 to June 2022. And that was the most significant price drop we have seen across the board. In fact, we have basically hovered in price since that time and pretty much treaded sideways across the board there. Interest rates went up and they hovered here at pretty high rates for quite some time. And in fact, one thing that stands out the most is once we had 5 or 6 months of stabilized rates, we did see an increase in price here in 2024. But when they raised the rates here in May 2023, look where this trend was here on the dot chart. We're seeing pricing go from January 2023 to May 2023 up about $200,000, 20%, once we started seeing some stability. So then when we got a little more rate increase there, prices just pretty much came down. And that's when we don't see that stabilization. We do see a reflection in price. We're going to basically cross paths here if the Bank of Canada makes another rate announcement on March the 12th, and anyone guess at this point with everything going on in the USA where that's going to look like. But this may be the first time we see a crisscross in the blue and the red since pretty much July 2022. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Important to note, most of the price drop happened February 2022 into July of 2022 as rates shot up very quickly. There you go. February 2022 versus February 2025. Totally different environments if you're a buyer or a seller in the market. And if you are a buyer buyer in the market looking to make some moves, or you've been planning on purchasing a property for quite some time, seeing how things have been trending at 5 months of inventory definitely tilts things a little bit into your favor. It does depend on the property you are looking to purchase and of course the price. And if you're a seller, on the flip side of that, if you're going to market in today's market, you want to make sure that the property looks fantastic, take care of any repairs that need to get done, and make sure that it shows incredibly well online and in person. So that presentation, that marketing, super important moving forward. And as mentioned at the start of this video, if you ever want to discuss your plans for Toronto real estate and how to succeed in 2025, click on that first link in the description down below or scan the QR code. I'm Michael Ouzas. Thanks for watching.